Welcome to Techquity Investing. We're bringing to you a series of video and podcast interviews called COVID 19 and PI. PI stands for Politics, Industry, and Economy. In this video series, we'll be getting and inviting various professionals from different industries who will be speaking their mind out honestly without apparent biases. We hope this video series is beneficial to our listeners, to viewers, and investors. It'll help shape you make decisions for the short term and the long term in your investment journey. If you like it, please hit like, ensure you subscribe to our channel. Welcome to this video podcast. This is the first of a series that we are planning to do. In this, we try to bring to you different industry opinions, different personal opinions of people who have a very diverse backgrounds and very interesting insights to share. Today we have with us Mr. Shashank Reddy. So a little bit about Shashank. Hi Shashank, firstly. Very happy
Hi, Kalpak.
that you're here. If you don't mind me, I will do a brutal, quick introduction of you and correct me if I go wrong. So
Please.
Shashank is a mechanical engineer by profession, and he spent the better part of the last more than a decade working in the infrastructure sector. So I know for a fact that in his initial days, Shashank was at site, erecting structures at ports, bridges, you name it. And then he moved up the ladder, grew really fast, and he represents one of the world's best MNCs in form work, and he has experience in dealing with power, metro rail projects, construction, engineering, cranes, OHTs, and the likes. Not just that, Shashank is an avid football fan. I think an Arsenal fan, right, Shashank?
Yes. Ask the last one. That's it.
Right, and also Shashank has a keen interest in politics. Shashank uh, quite frequently will share his views and ideas, and I always have found it to be quite interesting, insightful, occasionally controversial, but there is no political discussion without controversy. So let's begin, Shashank. Firstly, again, thank you very much for taking the time, buddy. So how tell me how you're coping with this? How has been the last 2 months? You're in Bangalore, right? So how's it going for you?
At the outset, thank you, Kalpak. Thank you so much for having me here. So I think just to begin with, I think these are unprecedented times, and none of us have really faced this situation. But to be very honest, I think now we are kind of getting used to the routine. It's almost been 2 months,
Right.
and being in primarily, in a field job in construction and sales,
Yeah.
and being used to go out the first couple of weeks were a challenge, where you have to figure out how you're supposed to do. But now I think everybody's got on board with the system. I mean, your workplace, your family, I think everybody's got used to this new system where today we can have technical meetings over the phone, we can have commercial meetings over the phone, we can have the meetings across Skype. You can use technology, to transcend the human boundaries of limitation. So that I think has been a very positive experience. That how people have managed to cope up and adapt to the situation. And obviously business is not like what business was, but people are still making the best of what is available, and we're trying to put our best foot forward. Yeah.
Great. And just taking that chain of thought forward, do you think you said that commercial activity is also happening online, which is quite unusual for a lot of traditional Indian businesses, but you have to roll with the times. Do you think sales jobs will become more and more redundant, or at least traveling based on sales will become a little redundant as we go ahead? Do you think the learnings that we have taken from this episode will actually be implemented by the corporate world?
Absolutely, Kalpak. I think that is a very big a big learning or a big insight that you take from all of this. The number of meetings that we used to earlier go meet clients. That has come down significantly. The number of things that you can do online with your laptop, and have a meeting across the world rather. And
Yeah.
the amount of money that you save on your overhead costs, travel costs, and the sheer effort. that you can save and optimize on is incredible. But also adding to that, I think sales also, there is a very human element to sales where you have to be able to build that personal rapport with the person that you're selling. You have to understand his needs. So I think the need for physical presence will never go. But I think I completely agree to you in a way that the number of meetings that you would do earlier, they can be dramatically reduced. And I think we are looking at a new work culture. It's up to organizations to learn and adapt and see how we can progress. Coming from very traditional industries, you're seeing this change in our industries as well, where the operations team, even the site teams. I mean, that is something which is unheard of, where site teams are remotely assisting the other people. So we have a lot of instructors, the technical expertise leaders. So they basically are assisting the site teams of the clients using video conferencing, where different photographs, images are shared.
Wow.
And that is quite incredible because, the sites, most of the critical sites that we do are also located in very remote locations. So the amount of time that is spent in to and fro, and, a person staying here can also find solutions.
Right.
I think that's a very new challenging work environment that has come up, and it's heartening to see how people have adapted to it. So I think that's great. And going forward, I definitely think, if not fully, at least a large chunk of these learnings will be adapted into our daily work.
Great. So thank you, Shashank. So being in the infra sector, being actually on ground quite a lot, and also speaking with the stakeholders as well, in your work profile, we spoke of how people at the top are engaging, and even site workers also adopting to it. Has work begun? We are today at, say, mid May, late May. Has construction work resumed? How is it going? How are the dynamics happening?
So, Kalpa, coming back to construction, I think we have two significant sectors. I think we can separate them. One is the residential and commercial sector, that is primarily down to cities, towns, where you have these malls, buildings, commercial spaces that is coming up. And the other one is the purely infrastructure segment, which is dams, bridges, pylons, roads, and the like. So what we are seeing right now is the traction in the infrastructure space has started, and it's not just today. It's been about 10 days now, 10 to 15 days now. So what also helps them is they are located away from major population centers, so containment is relatively easier. Although the ecosystem to support construction activity is not fully up yet, that is your ready-mix concrete plants, your bar benders, your reinforcement works, your core miscellaneous activities, I think they are still off. So construction has not begun in its full swing. But what you can see today is self-sufficient sites, large infrastructure sites which were capable of handling a lot of these activities themselves. That is, they have a batching plant in house and they have all these auxiliary workshops inside. So them you can see now they're picking up. I would say they're at a 50-60% of operational rate. And infra as such is not a sector that has been majorly hit. What they might be hit is basically project deadlines getting delayed by 1 month or 2 months.
Yeah.
But the business environment as such is not really all doom and gloom. Once it comes back, I'm pretty confident that they will put in more resources. Maybe in a couple of months, they will put in everything that they have to bring the projects back on track. Also, the city-based urban projects, because of the lack of traffic and all that. So you can imagine bridges, metros, and all. So they can really work fast.
Yeah.
So that will also be a good thing. I think the real pain that you're seeing today is in the residential and the commercial sector, because you're not sure about the demand. So the big problem today that you have is, even if they start construction, you are not sure of where the demand is going to come from. We can be optimistic that that there will be, but in such an environment, how many people are actually going to go out and buy houses? The demand is a real problem. The requirement for commercial space. We've seen the announcement by companies like TCS and other IT companies who are saying that they want to move to a work from home model, or at least a large chunk of the workforce wants to be working from home. So considering that, these are the people who really take up your office spaces. So your office spaces go down, and the surrounding, the auxiliary services, your hotels, your restaurants, your support infrastructure, basically, that is no longer there. So where is the demand going to come from? That is really a big question. But also, to be very honest, the commercial and real estate space in India, except with the exception of a few cities like Hyderabad, which is really booming,
There is almost
was really down. So I'm a bit worried that if this could really be the death knell for these sort of industries which are already suffering. So
yeah.
like the real estate sector in Bombay, if you see, was not doing well for the last couple of years, 2 3 years, and now this comes as a further act. So I think also we'll see a lot of consolidation where a lot of inefficient, unorganized players will be going away, and people will be moving towards your professional players, because professional players are something that they will offer your constructions on time. The quality of construction will be good. They will be
Yeah.
maybe able to incorporate the new learnings. Who knows? Maybe 3 years down the line, our office spaces might be very different. Our residential spaces might be very different. With this whole new work from home culture, you might just have a place in your own residential building that may accommodate for this. So there are going to be a lot of changes, and it's a whole new world out there, and we'll have to still see how it all shapes out. So I think there is a lot of there's going to be a lot of churning that is going to happen, and we have to be vigilant if we are in these sectors as to see what is happening.
Wow, Shashank, that was very interesting. That's a very interesting insight. So something like a two-bedroom hall kitchen office will be the new pitch to.
Very much, yeah, very much.
Okay.
That could be the way we go forward.
Okay.
Or maybe you have a common area in the bottom of the building, say with the 50 apartments. You have a place where the residential contractor or the residential company is itself providing a small one-floor area where you have small cubicles where you can work. So you
A
never know.
co-working space within the residential.
Yeah, within the building itself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought of that, but that's really, I mean, very interesting to think about. Another thing that we've touched upon, just the real estate. I would like to ask you one last question on the real estate sector. I want to majorly focus on infra. On real estate, there has been a lot of talk that the demand supply dynamics don't really control the pricing of real estate, and at many places that is the case. Like I mean, a lot of people cannot buy houses in large cities, and you have to be really top 3 percentile, top 2 percentile of income earners in these large cities to be able to own a house there. So with this now the situation, do you think demand supply will play a more active role in pricing for real estate spaces?
Certainly, Kalpak. So I think the way this industry is going to go forward is, you have, I think, segments, and these segments are very differently defined for different cities. Like, say, a house worth 1.5 or 1 crore is a premium segment in a city like Hyderabad. But in case of a city like Bombay, it's no longer premium. It's something in the middle range. So,
Yeah.
how people, because premium customers generally, they will not be majorly affected by this, by
Yeah.
the crisis. But also what has happened is, in a market like Bombay, in a micro market, say take a micro market like Worli, there is a significant oversupply of these properties. Like, how many people are actually there who can afford a 8 or a 10 crore house in
Yeah.
India today?
Yeah.
And do they already not have a house? And are they looking from an investment? Now, if you look at it from a perspective of an investment, you take an 8 crore house, what is the rental yield you are getting on that? You're not even getting 1%, maybe 1.5% you're getting that. It's much better to have liquid cash at this point of time. So, because capital appreciation, I don't think is happening in the next 5 6 years, at least in prime markets. Maybe in sub markets, like, say, some part of a large part of Hyderabad and some small North Indian cities that you can see a quality appreciation in terms of the prices, and then your whole objective makes sense in terms of your invested capital and the rental yield that you get. But if there is no capital appreciation, like in a city like Bombay, you don't have capital appreciation.
Right.
So I think there is only one way that is going to go down. But again, we've been talking about this for the last 8 10 years, that the Mumbai real estate market is not sustainable. But yet the prices continue to remain.
Right.
Developer maybe is willing to not sell the property, keep it idle, and move on. So again, that is there. But again, I think there is going to be a transformation in terms, like, people moving towards premium real estate developers. Like, if I have to take names, your Shobhas of the world, your Rustomjis, people who
Lodha,
have
yeah,
demonstrated, Lodhas, people who have demonstrated quality, people who have demonstrated adherence to timelines. I think there is going to be a market shift and a general professionalization of the overall industry.
indeed.
So, I mean, in terms of your productivity, what has happened in the last 15 years has been nothing sort of a miracle. Like what construction was 15 years ago, what construction is today, there is a fundamental change, at least amongst the large contractors, like, adopting modern practices or adopting European formwork systems, adopting a lot of, new innovative ideas. A contractor today is able to understand, pay 3 times, say, for an equipment, which gives him better efficiency and he can reduce manpower.
Wow.
So that awareness has come in contractors, which is very nice. And you see a lot of these premium contractors in India using premium vendors from across the world, not just Indian, but across the world, be it cranes, be it equipment, be it construction equipment, be it formwork or any other methodology that of construction that we have. We've seen that change. But what also I think there is a need for changes in the developer mentality as to how they operate and all that. We have professional players. I think going forward also you will see a lot more professional players coming up who
Right.
will adhere to modern practices of the
Got
trade.
it. Shashank, my next question
Yeah,
to you, bear with me, will be slightly long. Okay.
yeah.
You spoke initially earlier about the infra sector, and I agree with you that it is one of the sectors that has been relatively less hit. Okay, and work will quickly resume because a lot of the projects are and really are firstly self-sufficient by nature, or largely self-sufficient, and they're in isolated pockets. Okay, my question now is, the government, the finance minister recently announced a huge fiscal a stimulus 2.0 is what they're calling it, 20 lakh crore in 2020. I'm sure you went through it. Firstly, I would like to ask you, what do you think are its implications on the infra sector? And secondly, the infra sector as a whole, I'm talking here specifically about non-residential, non-real estate infra. Okay, how do you see it shaping for the next 1 or 2 years? That is a question that's something that really would interest our viewers. What are your thoughts?
So, Kalpak, to be honest, I think infra space, I am positive on infra
Hmm.
because this is majorly driven by government spending. The single largest factor driving infra today is government spending. And
Right.
we'll have to see how much, government commits to and how much, they're propositioning and what are the reforms that come into this. So are they going for privatization of part of railways? They're already into, privatization of airports. They're
Right.
trying to privatize, get roads on BOT basis where, the cost is borne by the person developing it.
Right.
So there are, I think, a couple of challenges from the government side is, where they get the funds from. But in terms of execution, I think we've seen a significant improvement in not just the approval processes going through, in how the infrastructure is coming up. Basically, I think the best example is, both of us being from Bombay, I think, is the Mumbai Metro. For the
Right.
first phase from Andheri from Ghatkopar to Versova to come up, I don't know. I think it took
Took 10
six,
years.
7 years
10
for
years,
that.
man. It's took
Yeah,
forever. Yeah.
12-kilometer, 8-kilometer stretch to come up, and today you have about 200 kilometers of construction and going at a breakneck speed.
I
You
swear.
can't
Yeah.
even imagine. Like I imagine. I remember, going from Andheri towards Borivali, and every 3 or 4 days I used to travel, and you could see 4 or 5 more piers come up, and the work is being uh, moving at a massive scale. And
Breakneck
again, if you
speed.
can,
Absolutely. Yeah.
absolute breakneck speed, and that too in a city like Bombay, which is extremely congested and you don't have place to go around. And if you also see the mega infrastructure projects that are coming up, that is, there is a new highway that is coming up between Delhi and Bombay, which
Yes.
aims to reduce the travel time to 12 hours. Work is already started on that, and they want to
The
complete it in the
DFC, the
next 5
dedicated,
years.
also the dedicated freight corridor, another large project that.
Yes, yes, the freight corridor that is going to come along with this highway. So
Yeah.
things like that you see, the large infrastructure projects, the Chennai Bangalore highway that is coming up, the Purvanchal highway that is coming up in
Yeah.
UP, the Ganga corridor, basically the extension of the 6-lane highway that is up to, it'll go beyond Lucknow and all those. So when you think of it, I mean, the nuclear power plants that are coming up. You have a nuclear power plant coming up in Chennai. You have a nuclear power plant coming up in Haryana. So if you see that way, I think the core infrastructure spending is going to be significant.
Yeah.
How it trickles down to the smaller level contractors is something that we have to see. I think the big boys definitely have a lot of work and they are going to do well. How it trickles down and how it brings up the entire ecosystem is something that we ought to see. And this is not essentially based on demand. I mean, some sectors are like airports and stuff are based on demand. But otherwise, it's I think India lags behind significantly overall in terms of where we are with respect to our total infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I think the capacity of the country to absorb a lot of infrastructure is significantly there. So the only thing that the government needs to ensure right now is proper timely payment to the contractors, clearances, approvals in place. And I see this sector really driving that. And also if you see from the economic ratios that we have, in the last couple of years, the percentage of government spending as a percentage of GDP has also increased.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the numbers, but I think it's gone up significantly.
Yes.
So I think that is what is going to drive the entire ecosystem. You know, the whole economic cycle that is there is going to essentially run through infra. I think largely it has to come through infra because as you see now, services, which is the largest part of the economy, is slightly subdued. So there will have to be something that really pulls up, and I hope it's infra. Although in comparison to services, infra is a small sector, but this is where I think we have to go forward.
But despite being a smaller sector as compared to services, government spending is probably the only viable driver in the short run to kind of get the economy moving, isn't it? I demand clearly is likely to be subdued. I don't see exports
Absolutely
up. I don't
correct.
see it happening. A lot of trade really picking up in the short term, and savings also, personal savings will be at an all-time low. People will be very conservative with their wealth. I'm sure it is already the case with the markets totaling in the recent times. A lot of people are quite freaked. So I mean, government spending has to lead the way, and as you rightly said, there is already an infra deficit in the country, which is an opportunity in itself, right? And the government had already laid out 5-year plans of 100 lakh crore in infra spending. So do you see a lot of front loading of that expenditure, like those projects be fast tracked or something that was planned for 2-3 years?
Absolutely, I think that is going to happen.
I mean, it'll be a little lay question, but is it possible to do that? Because infra projects are typically quite long. They require a lot of project management, a lot of evaluation, lot of preliminary work. Study the soil structure, all those things. Can you really accelerate the pace? Is it possible?
So, Kalpak, to honestly answer that, I've at least in my decade plus experience of working in these projects, I've seen a significant change of how the projects are happening today. So, also what is happening is they're involving a lot of these international consultants, who are the primary stakeholders in the project, where they determine what are the standards and how the project is supposed to be followed, the methodologies that are supposed to be used in construction. And it is the whole landscape has changed is what I feel. The way also you have the technological change, like something that you could not do maybe 15-20 years ago. Today you have the technology to do that, and the technology, more importantly, is available in India. So the latest, like if you see construction series, so the latest equipment is available today in India at whatever price. Like, who would have thought you would have so many tunnel boring machines today in India? India is awash with tunnel boring machines across the country.
Right.
Be it Bombay, Jaipur, Lucknow, anywhere, the traditional methods are gone. So I think also that has come, and also with this government, you see that seriousness for infra spending, be it land acquisition, being it getting the approvals in place, being it the developmental plans that were there. So I think you've seen that. I've closely worked with the Bombay Metro, so on a personal level, I can really quote that. It was really heartening to see how fast the approvals really went through, how fast everything was happening. So maybe at some point the contractors could not keep up. They were not expecting that this is the speed that they're going to work with. So it was really amazing at the breakneck speed at which it went, despite there being so many challenges in terms of the kind of land they had to acquire in Bombay is not easy. It was a real challenge, to get the land available for construction, to put up the barricades, especially in case of the underground metro that is coming up. Real challenges. But I think the government came up and they really pushed it through. So it's heartening. I mean, there were hiccups. There is no denying that, but there were hiccups. But also on the other front, I think there is a bit of a knowledge deficit, I feel, in terms of understanding the whole economic cycle, I feel. So I think that could maybe have been done better from this government. But in terms of infra spending and infra approvals and process, I think it has been a fantastic, thing what has happened in the last last few years.
Got it. Got it. So Shashank, if you don't mind me, summarizing, for our viewers. So infra in the coming days looks bright. The government might front end some spending. It will also have a potential of generating some employment. The big boys in infra, the big companies, I'm not going to name names, are likely to probably do well. Have a positive externality out of this. My question now is, a lot of infra companies, Shashank, as you must already be knowing, if you see the stocks of a lot of infra companies, they're not really doing well. I would say that is probably one of the most laggard sector in India right now from a listed entities perspective. A lot of companies are very heavily leveraged. There is a lot of receivable spending, a lot of projects that are delayed, stuck for whatever reasons. There is a lot of especially the smaller infra companies. So there is a lot of leverage on their books. Okay. Now with this question is specific to these smaller companies with a high leverage. Now the government is now becoming a little lenient with liquidity. They're saying, okay, come take loans, no problem. MSME, why not? Fine, all great. Do you think these companies will be able to actually survive and thrive in this environment? Do you think it's a despite being a small company who is leveraged in a bad situation, unable to pay people, do you think there is a way out from here for those companies?
To be honest, Kalpak, I do not. I do not. I think companies which are run poorly, especially in the infra space, are bound to fail. So I have a very strong opinion on that, because what I feel is, unless your business metrics are right, the infrastructure will really suck you in. So it's impossible to operate a good infrastructure company. So what we are seeing today is also the same thing, that you have these companies which come as bubbles for 5 years, 6 years, and then they go bust. The real guys who run infrastructure companies in a professional manner, have professional setups, do not have unnecessary political linkages, apply for tenders in right methodologies, go through all the process, due diligence, the processes for getting the orders, are the companies that are surviving and are thriving. Great. So there is no room for laxity in professionalism. There is no room for laxity in business metrics. So there are been, I'm not naming the companies, there have been some companies which have done exceedingly well. Yeah, some of them are even non-listed over the last 5 years. Maybe they have some political connections and that helps them get through. But even in those companies, I noticed there is a massive switch towards professionalism. Right. That is, decision making authority at every level. You see that people are allowed to. It's not like a single person run company, and companies which are generally run like that. Pardon my language, but the Lala Seth kind of organizations. I think the future is there is no future for such companies. Eventually they will go down. So you need professionally run companies with proper hierarchies, with qualified professionals who are able to get the value engineering aspect of it, because I think the quality constraints are also becoming stringent. 10 years ago, you could build a dam with cracks. Today, it is not possible. Today, you have such stringent quality, checks that are coming in. So that is something that you'll have to keep doing. So, right. Yeah. So going forward, I definitely see a lot of professionalism that is going to come across in these industries.
Shashank, a sneaky question. Any stock picks? Your thoughts?
To be honest, Kalpak, it would be wrong on my part, because right now I don't think I was invested in a couple of infrastructure companies previously. but they do not really act out as how I thought. I mean, they're performing great. They're
Mhm.
performing really well in terms of their business metrics and how they're doing. But the stock is not really showing that appreciation. I think that is the general dislike towards that particular sector in terms of
Right.
how people view it. But yeah, there are a couple of companies based out of Gujarat which I find really interesting. PSP being one of them.
Which one? Beg your
Uh,
pardon?
J-
Which company?
yeah, PSP.
PSP. Right.
Yeah. So this is basically a construction company based out of Gujarat, which has a niche in terms of what kind of buildings it does and what kind of works it does. So that is, I think, looking really good. It is in the infra and the commercial space. I've personally dealt with them also. So
Nice.
again,
Nice.
good managed company. There were also a couple of Bombay-based companies, I think, which were doing well. But then again, they have corporate governance issues, so I would not be really, inclined to suggest them as a company going forward.
No
Yeah,
worries, no worries. No, it's really good to hear honest opinions from somebody who's actually in the thick and thin of the business, because financial tips from people who don't understand the sector is what viewers are used to. Okay, Shashank, thank you. Great talking about
yeah,
infra. Now, can we turn a switch and move a little bit to economy and politics, right? And
sure.
I know it's one of your strong subjects. I always liked hearing you on these subjects. I have a two-faced question. Firstly, I want to ask you: do you see a rise in anti-incumbency uh, in India in general? And what do you think will be the state of social equality post 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 this COVID you know pandemic?
Um,
How
True. Yeah, Kalpa, coming to the first part of your question, I think we are living in times which are very polarized.
hmm
So I think not making a specific comment on any of the government, but I think if you had this sort of an economic performance, what we have had in the last 1 year, 2 year, and the kind of, the way the economy is being handled today, for any other government, I think they would struggle. I would really struggle. But we also know that there are factors other than the economy which are currently driving the politics of today. I think it is the nature of not just India; it is the world over. What is happening today is very, very different in terms
so
of
movement
how the
from
world is structured. Yeah.
liberal to say nationalistic politics, is that
Yes,
what? Okay.
nationalistic, right wing, more towards your right wing. I think we
Yeah.
are seeing that movement today in the country, and I think so. I don't know whether this really translates into anti-incumbency, because a lot of times I think we also mistake it, because I think I see a general change in the trend, not just throughout the tenure of this government, but just the handling of the corona threat. I mean, people who are not really connected to the economy, who are not really connected to the business environment, they have a very different opinion on the government. They're very happy with how the government is working and how it is going, but people who are in the thick and thin of the business, they are really really suffering. So you can see the pain that is coming through, and the lack of
Shashank,
measures, the
can I?
perceived lack of measures. Yeah,
Shashank, just one
sorry.
second. Just remember that chain of thought. I want to have a sub question. Very interesting thing you said here about the corporate India having, not being very happy. I also spoke with a lot of people, and they say that the breakneck speed with which reforms are happening or new rules are coming out, a lot of people are saying that they're scared to make investments or new capital expenses because they're not sure whether policy will change overnight. Is that really something that you've seen as well?
Very, very true, Kalpak. I think what has gone. I think from how our economies were traditionally structured was there was a general idea around which the economy or the budget was positioned, and you worked along that, and this continued over a period of time. Now, what you see is a complete change in policy, complete reversal in 3 months. Like you have a budget, and then 3 months later you have a policy which completely takes the economy in an opposite direction.
Right.
You have no clarity as to why things are being done. You have a, a very reactive sort of a government, I feel, at least on the economics part. They're extremely reactive, where one small thing, and there is not a thorough analysis of at least letting your own policies, you know, uh, go through their entire tenure to see how they're coming across. You know,
Right.
their decisions, you know, taken haphazardly. I feel it is my perception that, you know, firefighting all the time. So I think that is not entirely, you know, the economic idea or how the economy is supposed to be run has to have a structure, that, you know, you can have a definitive structure that, you know, we are moving more towards you know, opening up the economy, or we are moving more towards, you know,
Closing it.
getting government control or something like that. Here, you know, you have everything that is going on together.
I agree
So, you
with
know,
you.
as an investor, you would be really scared, right, to invest. That, you know, you find see, an investor also would like to invest where there are returns. Returns come when, you know, your system is designed in such a way that, you know, you can make some money out of that system. I'm not talking about unethical terms.
Right.
Ethically also, even if you have to make money, you know, say a policy comes up and you see an opportunity, you invest there, and you make an investment, and tomorrow they say that this policy is no longer valid. What
Yeah.
happens to your investment?
Right.
The government is not going to pay you back. You have to be sure as to, you know, what you're doing, how you're going about it, and all that. And I think in terms of competency also, we are seeing a major problem with a lot of ministries, you know,
Mhm.
coming and making random statements, and
Yeah.
it's not really adding to the whole environment of, you know, that a business needs to thrive. So I think that is something that, you know, we need to really push up,
Yeah.
and we need to really get going on that front.
So because the government does seem to, you know, favor, they want the industry to invest, to thrive, MSME sector to go up, but with, you know, there has to be a fine balance in reform as well, you know, so that you can't keep changing the rules, because otherwise I think that could be one of the reasons in the last few years that, you know, the capital expenditure has really shrunk. Actually, people are, I think, I don't know whether it's a demand issue or whether it's a fear issue, because, you know, in general people are not really sure about, you know, money is there, I'm not sure whether I want to invest it. It could be a
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And see, some of the things that you saw like a few days back, a couple of state governments abolished labor laws. I
right.
mean, that is a very, very big step. You cannot just come out today and say that I will abolish labor laws, and today they're backtracking on those statements. They're saying that, oh, it was going to be something conditional. You know, these things, like, you know, a
Yeah.
stable, mature economy does not behave like this. You know,
Right.
then what is the difference between, say, us and a small, you know, republic in Africa? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
sorry
No,
for the
no,
example, but, you know,
it's a fair point.
you have to give confidence to investors
Yeah,
as
yeah,
to, you know, that this is a stable government, there is a policy initiative, and there is, you know, how the policies are going to resonate. So there has to be something of that end that, you
yeah.
know, that we push through.
I really think, Shashank, what you said right now is nothing else but constructive criticism. I think it is definitely needed, because there is a lot of good things that the government does. I think human life was given a lot of value during this pandemic, and I think
Absolutely agreed. Yeah.
being a powerful figure on the top, the country followed. You know, by, you know, there was not really a lot of chaos as a lot of people expected. So credit where credit is due, and, you know, also some constructive criticism which can help, you know, at the end of the day all of us want the same thing, right? For the you know, for the economy to boom,
True.
for you know, social inequality to decrease, you know. So on the social inequality front, I sorry I interrupted your chain of thought. Getting you back there, what are your thoughts about that? How do you think it's going to shape?
So, Kalpak, I think social inequality, I feel, is going to expand. I'm sorry to be saying that, but, you know,
Yeah.
there are some professions which are in demand. There are some professions which are not in demand, and, you know, the way the world is being structured. I'm not talking about India as such. I'm just talking about the whole world. You
Hmm.
know, a 22-year-old or a 23-year-old fresh engineering college graduate out of college. I think we've discussed this before. Gets 30 lakhs per annum, and, you know, somebody with 20 years of work ex who understands a particular type of business in a different industry does not make one-fifth of that. So
Right.
also, you know, again, this is completely dependent. It's a market-based thing that is happening, which is a function of your skill sets and the demand for those particular skill
Absolutely.
sets that are there. But, you know, I support this. This is, I think, the basis,
Of
the
free
basic
market economy. Yeah.
free market economy. But also I don't support regulation in this, but I think we have to take a real stance as to how far are we wishing to push the envelope. Like how far can it go? Can it be, say, that an industrial labor makes 1/100th the income of somebody in a top level coding job? Is that fair? Or does somebody in an investment bank make about 100 times the income of somebody who's helps with keeping the city clean? So we have to draw, maybe at some point, the society also has to take charge, and this has to be balanced out. Or what is going to happen is, the entire power, the entire money in the hands of a few, and the rest of the society depends on that. And these are dangerous social connotations. When a part of the society has nothing to lose anymore, you don't know what consequences you face as a society. Today it might be good that you are able to afford 5 domestic helps, one for each activity that you're doing. But tomorrow, if their income levels are so low that a revolution or social upheaval does not really matter to them, what are you going to do next? That is what happens when the difference between the haves and the have-nots increase so much. I think there are going to be social consequences, and we have to be very, very prepared to face that. And social consequences of such kind are the worst, because they take away years of hard work that you've built up in building up a society, or thus giving a structure to a society. In 6 months, you can have that entire structure dismantled, as we've seen in the world. We've seen these instances happening in the world when you don't control one certain element of the society, and you have lost basically all the incremental gains that you have made over 30 years. So that is something that we have to really look forward to.
Shashank, what you said just right now reminded me of a beautiful quote that I read recently. I think it was a quote by Nikola Tesla. It said, it was in relation to the stock markets. It said that there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. So I think what you also said really applies to that as well, to equality as well. Because should inequality become so severe that, as you rightly said, it could result in non peaceful activities. It can really destabilize what the country has worked so far for creating a good environment. I fully second and agree with you on this point, and thank you for bringing that to light. Shashank, I would like to close on a positive note. I want to ask you a few questions. So it might sound like an oxymoron, but what are the biggest positives that you took from the coronavirus pandemic and being locked down, personally?
I think, Kalpak, if you ask me the positive, I saw a lot of positives. I think, I've started working out, which I've not been doing for so long. So I've had the opportunity to really put in some kind of effort into that. I've been doing a lot of reading also into that. So I think the two principal aspects of your thing, one is your mind and your body. I think I've been able to push it forward. And also, I think it might sound surprising, but I've got furthermore connected to friends and family. I think earlier, making time was a bit of a challenge. That you couldn't really get in touch with them. But now I think I talk every day to my niece, I talk to my parents, I talk to my brother, I talk to my friends. We have a group call, and we've got up more activities to keep the social engagement level up, which was maybe missing earlier in our schedules. And going forward, I think it's not really that difficult to be in touch with people who really matter to you. Helps you stay grounded. It helps you stay connected. So I think that's a very positive thing in the way it has gone. So I think this has been a big positive in terms of Corona. And also, I think in terms of work, I figured, I've been able to do a lot of things, by not physically visiting sites. I handle a region, so not excessively traveling to all these regions and all that. So I average a lot of flights a month, going to individually to these clients. So now you also understand the importance of delegating activities, trusting the team members, and just taking it forward. I think people can do what is required of them. So I think that's the positives that have come out of this entire situation.
Very nice to hear, Shashank. Brought a wide smile to my face. All right. Thank you so much, Shashank, for taking the time. I think I had a great time. I think I hope you did too.
Absolutely, Kalpak. It was an absolute pleasure. Very invigorating. and a very thought-provoking session. And I thank you for the opportunity and thank you for having me here. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, buddy. Pleasure. Thank you so much, Shashank.
Thank you. Bye.